The scent of lavender and old paper always clung to Eleanor's study, a familiar, suffocating perfume that Chloe inhaled deeply every time she entered, a ritualistic acknowledgement of the air she still, in some fundamental way, belonged to even as she navigated the brittle expanse of her late 20s. Chloe stood by the antique mahogany desk, tracing the cool, polished grain with a fingertip, the silence between them thick enough to chew. Eleanor sat opposite, a silhouette against the afternoon light fracturing through the lace curtains, her needlepoint lying abandoned in her lap, the vibrant threads suddenly muted by the tension radiating between the two women. The silence was not peace, it was the carefully constructed barrier built over 2 decades of unspoken needs and misinterpreted gestures. Eleanor had always envisioned a life for Chloe as neat and ordered as the embroidery pattern she favored. A stable career, perhaps a respectable fiancé, a life lived within the secure parameters of shared history. Chloe, however, felt like a wild, uncooperative vine, intent on scaling walls Eleanor had painstakingly erected to keep the world out, or perhaps Chloe in. The expectation hung between them like an invisible, suffocating shroud woven from Eleanor's quiet anxieties and Chloe's roaring need to prove her own self. Sufficiency. Eleanor believed love manifested as provision, as structure, as the ensuring of safety. Chloe perceived it as a cage, however gilded. Chloe had moved back into the converted attic room 3 months ago, ostensibly to save money while launching her freelance graphic design career, but really she knew, because the silence in her own small rented apartment had become too loud, too easily filled by the echoes of Eleanor's disapproval filtering through the thin walls of her memory. Every completed project Chloe presented felt less like a professional success and more like a frantic audition. Each client, testimonial a desperate plea for Eleanor's approval, an approval that remained, perpetually just beyond reach like a perfectly tuned frequency Eleanor refused to acknowledge. Eleanor watched Chloe's frantic keyboard clicking, the hurried way. She sipped lukewarm tea, seeing not ambition, but instability. She remembered the precise calibration of the world when Chloe was small, the perfect alignment of toys, the predictable schedule of naps and meals, a controllable universe. Now Chloe's life was a blur of late nights, strange coffee shops, and the disconcerting lack of permanence in her phone calls, each conversation ending abruptly, leaving Eleanor with the metallic taste of fear in her mouth. The unspoken resentments were layered deep, fossilized moments of conflict that neither had the courage to excavate. There was the forgotten 18th birthday party, overshadowed by Eleanor's emergency hospital visit for a minor ailment, an event Chloe had interpreted as deliberate abandonment, while Eleanor still saw it as the necessary sacrifice of a devoted parent. There was Chloe's decision to drop out of the pre-law track, a path Eleanor had charted. Since Chloe was in kindergarten, a decision met not with anger, but with a chilling, sustained withdrawal of warmth that chilled Chloe to the bone more effectively than any shouted argument. Chloe often thought about the mathematical purity of Eleanor's disappointment, a constant value dollars in the equation of their relationship, where $0 always, regardless of Chloe's current output. "Are you eating properly, dear?" Eleanor's voice, thin as tracing paper, finally broke. The tension, the inevitable pivot from silence to domestic surveillance. Chloe forced a smile that felt like cracking plaster. "Yes, Mum. Had a falafel wrap. At lunch. Very filling." She hated falafel, despised the texture, but the lie was easier than explaining the complicated social dynamics of the shared communal kitchen downtown. Eleanor's gaze drifted to the stack of unopened mail on the corner of the desk, thick envelopes bearing the letterhead of Chloe's former university, overdue, notices masquerading as official correspondence. Eleanor knew they were there. She didn't need to read them to understand their contents. She understood debt as a failure of planning, a smudge on the otherwise clean ledger of responsibility. "That freelance work," Eleanor began, carefully placing her needlework aside, the silk threads gleaming momentarily under the harsh overhead light. "Is it consistent? Truly consistent?" The word truly was weighted with years of implied skepticism. "It will be," Chloe responded, her voice sharper than intended. "I'm building momentum. It's just that the industry values time over immediate monetary return, you know? It's about establishing reputation, She felt the familiar pressure building behind her sternum, the urge to scream about the stifling nature of reputation when all she wanted was the latitude to fail privately, the freedom to crash without the sound of Eleanor's inevitable mournful sigh echoing through the aftermath. The struggle for independence manifested in small, almost invisible acts of rebellion. Chloe started leaving the bathroom light on when she showered. In knowing Eleanor conserved energy religiously, she began listening to harsh, industrial music on headphones late at night, turning the bass up until the floorboards vibrated slightly, a tiny earthquake only she could truly feel. These were not revolutionary acts, but necessary boundary markers, lines drawn in the sand against Eleanor's pervasive, well-meaning control. Eleanor, in turn, continued to tidy Chloe's room while she was out, folding clothes that had just been worn, dusting surfaces Chloe had meticulously cleared, an unwitting declaration that Chloe's space was never truly hers, always subject to inspection and remediation. The pivotal event arrived not with a bang, but with a sickening, slow motion, crunch near the intersection of Elm and Fourth, a place Chloe had navigated hundreds of times on her bicycle, a cheap, battered thing she relied on to keep her physical distance from her mother. It was raining, a brutal, icy November, downpour that turned the asphalt slick and unforgiving. Chloe, distracted by a late-night email from a demanding client, missed the amber warning by a crucial second. The impact wasn't catastrophic, but the collision with a larger, more solid vehicle sent Chloe sprawling, her dominant arm, the one holding the stylus, that earned her living, snapping against the curb with a sound that vibrated up her spine long after the immediate shock faded. The driver, thankfully, responsible and shaken, called the ambulance. When the call came, it was past midnight. Chloe, groggy from the painkillers, administered at the emergency room, finally managed to dial her home number. Eleanor answered on the first ring, her voice sharp with immediate alarm, proving that despite everything, her vigilance remained absolute. "Chloe, what is it? Are you all right?" "Mom," Chloe whispered, the effort of speech a searing pain. "I had an accident. My arm. They think it's broken. I'm at St. Jude's." The ensuing silence on the line was different this time. It wasn't the thick, stagnant silence of resentment. It was the sharp, immediate vacuum of pure terror. Eleanor didn't ask about the bike, or the client, or the rain. She just said, "Stay put. I'm leaving now." Eleanor arrived an hour later, her face a mask of tightly controlled distress. Her usual elegant composure shattered, replaced by the raw, elemental fury of a mother whose child has been damaged by the outside world. She didn't scold or judge. She simply took charge, efficiently arranging the paperwork, speaking with the orthopedic surgeon in low, commanding tones, securing a comfortable, private room. She held Chloe's good hand, her skin cool, her grip surprisingly strong. The necessary conversation began 2 days later. After the cast was set, a bulky, immobilizing white shell encasing Chloe's working arm, they were back in Eleanor's sun-drenched living room, the light softened by the persistent gray sky. Chloe felt utterly helpless, dependent on Eleanor for everything from fetching water to manipulating the TV remote. The humiliation was potent, yet within it, a strange clarity bloomed. "I haven't called about the overdue notices," Chloe admitted quietly, staring at the intersection of her cast and the floral armchair fabric. "I've been paying the minimum, trying to juggle things. But that car..." She trailed off, the calculation of recovery time suddenly grim. Eleanor didn't look up from polishing a silver picture frame, a habit she used when thinking deeply. "I know about the notices, Chloe. I check the post when you're out late. I always have." The admission hung there, heavy and unexpected. Chloe felt a rush of conflicting emotions, violation, certainly, but also a profound, sad relief that the charade of perfect secrecy was finally over. "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because," Eleanor said, finally meeting her daughter's eyes, her own eyes, startlingly clear. "I didn't want to be the reason you felt you had to prove yourself so fiercely that you ignored basic safety. I didn't want to confirm your fear that I only value stability. I wanted you to succeed on your terms, but I was terrified. Those terms would leave you stranded, which, ironically, is exactly what happened." She paused, taking a shaky breath, the carefully constructed dam of her composure finally beginning to crack. I see your talent, Chloe. I see how hard you work. I need to know you are safe. That is the baseline. All the career choices, all the independence, they mean nothing if you are fundamentally unsafe. Chloe looked at her mother, truly seeing past the controlling tendencies to the terrified core of the woman who had spent a lifetime trying to buffer her only child from every jagged edge of existence. The unspoken resentment about the pre-law track suddenly seemed small, dwarfed by the magnitude of Eleanor's lifelong, often misplaced fear. I need to be able to fail, Mum, Chloe confessed, the words raspy. I need to know that if I crash, not into a car, but my business plan, my finances, that you won't look at me like I'm structurally unsound, that you won't see it as proof that I should have listened to you. Eleanor reached out with her free hand, resting it gently on the rough plaster of the cast. No, I won't. I realize now that my need for order was just my own fear, dressed up as guidance. You are not a machine, Chloe. You are not meant to run on perfect, predictable cycles. I apologize for making you feel that you had to shout to be heard over the sound of my quiet expectations. The conversation didn't solve everything instantly. The chasm of years of misunderstanding would take time to bridge, but in the quiet aftermath, with Chloe's arm healing slowly, dependent yet seen, the echo of silence had changed. It was no longer the sound of judgment or distance, but the resonant space required for two strong women to finally begin to hear the true, complex rhythm of each other's hearts. Chloe realized that her independence wouldn't be won by fleeing Eleanor, but by forcing Eleanor to see the sturdy structure she had built for herself, even if it looked nothing like the blueprint Eleanor had drawn. The healing began not just in the bone beneath the plaster, but in the fragile, finally acknowledged truth spoken in the gentle light of a shared living room.